Hi, this is J.R. Martin with the Indie Publisher Bookstore podcast, and today I have Mae Lynn with me, author of Atlanta's Most Eligible Bachelor. How are you doing today, Mia?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you, JR?
Pretty good, pretty good. So, first off, I always like to start by having the authors tell us a little bit about themselves in the book. So, can you go ahead and give us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and about your book?
Atlanta area for most of my adult life, which is where I got the inspiration for the book, Atlanta's Most Eligible Bachelor. So it was a book that I probably had in my head for several years before I put it down to paper. So in 2008, I had left my career in aerospace, and about a month later, I had a paragraph, and I wrote 8 books around by the time Christmas came. So it was a labor of love, and the next year, life events happened, and I put it away for a while, and then the opportunity came for me to go into self-publishing. So I started the process of looking into self-publishing and bringing the book back to life. And I launched the first book November 4th of 2015, which is my oldest son's birthday. And the next book will be released on April 26th, which is my youngest son's birthday. So in this series, Southern Men Don't Fall in Love, I'll be releasing it twice a year.
Oh, nice. So that's a pretty hectic writing schedule. About how many words do you get per book?
I'm trying to get as close to around 40,000 words a book. So it's basically a quick read. I'm not trying to get, too in-depth because it's a series. That way it will keep their interest versus a lot of times people just don't want to pick up a 70, 80,000 word book. They want to pick up something that's quick enough to schedule, or if they're on a plane ride, or if they just want a couple of evenings. So I wanted to make it a quick enough read.
Understood. I definitely know it seems to be going that way. I know some of the people I've spoken with, they've all mentioned the fact that it does seem like the way people are writing now is geared more towards the new reader, the type of person who only has maybe 40 minutes a day to be able to dedicate to reading, or wants to sit down and knock out a book in maybe 2 or 3 hours, as opposed to reading some of the longer novels that take you days and days to finish, even if you're reading consistently a couple hours at a time. So that's I do completely understand that. That's pretty standard now. So what inspired you to write this particular book? What about what drove you to write this?
Well, the inspiration came when, as I stated before, when I had a month off and I had the time to write it. And what happened was the characters, I was up 4 o'clock in the morning, getting up, putting a couple hours in, day and night, just formulating the stories. And because the series is interlocking, meaning that the characters will pop in and out of other books, I had to put a timeline together, because for certain characters, especially with pregnancies, if because there are some in the series, that those are on a specific timeline and you can't put them too long or too short. So it was a great way for me to pull my creative juices together. It's sort of like a soap opera. If you can imagine when you're looking at a soap opera and each of the individual characters have separate storylines, and then they all come together in certain scenes. And the series is designed that way. So you'll see fictional as well as non-fictional places around Atlanta and the metro Atlanta area, and how or influence the characters into their love lives, which is basically like the South. The South does have a lot of family influence. They generally, when you're dating, you're going not only meet the parents, but you're going to meet grandparents and aunts and uncles and first cousins and all of that, because the South is very family oriented.
That's true. So I'm in Texas myself, and you're right about that. It's very family oriented here in the South. It's always about family. Like, we always joke about, hey, is this woman, is this guy somebody that you can take home to your mother to meet your father, those types of things. Or, what is your grandpa going to say about him? What is your grandmother going to say about him? So I completely understand that. That is a lot of family right there. Or in the South, family is a big deal. So my question, though, is how much of this is, because of your timelines, do you find that you have to plot out your stories more, or is it more of an organic type thing where you can just kind of write on, then kind of go back and take a look and make sure everything fits in one contained timeline?
The latter of the two. I just put it on paper and then see where it fits in. And sometimes what I'll have to do is go back and forth into the different stories and see if I exactly hit where it should hit. And sometimes I've discovered, I'm off a week or something like that, and I'll go back and make the adjustments. So it is dynamic. So I've been doing some editing and rewriting for book 2. So I have had to slow down the timeline because book 1 is a lot faster timeline. So please slow down just a little bit because the characters are going into a little more detail about how others interact with them and how they interact with each other is the way the second book is more so going.
Okay. And who are some of the inspirations that you have as writers? Like, do you believe your style is similar to somebody else's, or is there any author? Are there any authors that you read a lot of that you feel your style may be similar to, or the way you write is similar to?
Well, I think my style is my own, but I know that for the first book, my inspiration came out of Leslie Eisdale's book, The Sisterhood of Shopaholics. She had a story where an airline pilot met a woman like 3 times in the same day. And I kind of taken that concept in this book and expanded on it. What about if I have characters that meet every day somewhere else, all around the city, and it's unexpected, and so you're going to find a lot of book 1 is about the couple's meetings. So the primary character is Doug. And I believe I kind of spend the first book more about Doug than about Lisa. And Doug is basically the guy that women want to have. I mean, he's a blonde, he's successful, he's in shape, he's just very intelligent, but he's very elusive. So that's why he's basically been Atlanta's most eligible bachelor. He's got a 3-date max model. I mean, he's just not going to commit to anyone. And then you have Lisa, who's very independent. She's African American. She's had a soccer career. She's taken on a new challenge for a CPA firm. She coaches soccer. She's very, very active. And she doesn't necessarily have to have a partner because she has her own life to live. And so you've got 2 very strong characters that have come together in the first book. And how they've met and how they've decided that, okay, yes, we need to be together. The development more so comes into the next book. So the first book is really about introducing the characters and seeing their strengths, introducing some family members, and I believe it's really an enjoyable read. It's a light read, the first book. Although it's a romance novel, it's general enough that your grandmother could read it. I mean, it's also it's in Spanish, and I do have some large print versions as well as the ebook versions. And it's really a quick read. I noticed that some of my audience are men who like the first book because of the element of surprise in it. whereas the second book is more going to be more your romance type, where there are interactions and more of the I love yous and all of that. So it gets more down your true traditional romance road.
Okay. That's actually kind of surprising that most of your audience so far has been men. Usually men stay away from the romance, but that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump on the one thing real quick. So you said the book is also in Spanish. Did you write it in Spanish yourself?
No, I wrote it in English, and when I told my son about my project, he has a bachelor's degree in Spanish from Creighton, and he volunteered to translate it for me. So he translated it to Spanish, and he said, "Mom, I'm not a native Spanish speaker." So what he did was he got two of his college friends, one in Mexico and one in Spain, to edit it to the Spanish version and to the European Spanish version. So I have two versions of Spanish available. So those who speak more of your North America, South American Spanish, I've got Spanish of the Americas versions, which is SA. And for those who are more into the European culture, I've got the ES version, which is your European Spanish. And there are subtle differences in the languages. It's sort of like the subtle differences between your UK English and your American English. Even with certain words that are spelled are a little bit different.
Right. Oh, no, I completely understand that. That's actually some things I talk about all the time with friends of mine. It's like, man, it's kind of interesting how, in the UK, it's the boot of your car, but here in the US, it's the trunk of your car, and, a lift versus an elevator, and all the different types of, like, small things that we get it as soon as you say it, but it just takes that brief second of, okay, let me get check my understanding to make sure I have everything in context before continuing on. So I get that. That's actually pretty impressive, though, that your son was able to get a America Spanish or New World Spanish and a European Spanish translation done for you. How have those sold with the European Spanish and the your New World America's type Spanish?
Well, I think that what happened was initially everything went great. Everything was I had gotten up to about 500 books sold. But then I looked online, and I kept seeing gratis, and I did some research and realized I have book pirates that have taken the book, they've downloaded the contents, they've put it out for free, so my sales have pretty much dropped in the Spanish version. So it's very difficult when you're working against book pirates. So some of the things that I've tried to do was to market the book as saying, hey, if the pirates are reading it, get your legal version. I mean, it's a pretty good read if there is value in the black market, so to speak. One of the other things, occasionally I have written some of the sites, if you can get a website address to say, hey, I have copyrights, would you please take this down? One of the things is the European Spanish released before the Spanish of the Americas, so that one is a little bit more popular. But I'm hoping that at some point when my son is back in the United States that we can put together a marketing plan for the Spanish market, because I don't speak Spanish. I've had Spanish in high school years ago, and I believe that if I had a little more Spanish, as a second language, that I would be able to market it a little better in those neighborhoods.
Okay, that's awesome. And then, since you're talking about marketing, how did you market your book when you first came out with it? I mean, did you have a blog that you were posting on, or what exactly did you do to be able to market your book to get it to so many people? Well,
right now I got on Goodreads. I have actually got a contest going on through March 4th, which is my birthday, and so I'm giving away 10 free copies of the book. And if you're registered on Goodreads, you can register for the contest. I actually used, my alma mater, University of Akron, they did a November article on me about my book release, so that helped. I think there are some sites out there that actually pick up new authors, and they, put out the new releases. So that was available to me as well. Amazon has Amazon Author Central, where I have put together a list of my appearances. So I have several appearances coming up, some book signings as well as appearances at book clubs. So I'm available for those too. So I've tried a variety of ways. I tried a Spingo Marketing. They're a marketing company, and had them do some Facebook type ads into Spain and as well as to Mexico and down under to Australia and Canada. So I'm still trying out different ways to market the book, and as well as making appearances. So I'm open to ideas.
Yeah, I hear that. So did you start making appearances immediately after the release of the book, or is that something new that you're just starting?
Well, I did have an appearance November 17th at Swirl Wine Bar, which is in Solon, Ohio, and to just get a feel for where I could draw my market. And the wine bar I thought was kind of nice because you actually have couples and they're out on a date or they've been married for years, and you get a chance to sit down and talk to them. And, when you're talking about your romance novel, it's kind of a nice way to offer it to them to kind of get that rekindling going between the couples if they're not already in the rekindling process.
All right. And speaking of couples, so one of the big things in your book is the fact that your couple is interracial. So while you're at the wine bar, did you notice a lot of interracial couples? And what made you decide to go on ahead and write about an interracial couple?
Well, one of the things, I hadn't noticed a lot of interracial couples, and especially where the woman is a African-American female and the man is Caucasian. My thoughts were to enhance the differences, to give the story a little more depth, because for someone like Doug, when you're talking about a professional Southern male taking on the challenge of bringing in another culture to the South, as far as a lifetime partnership, I wanted to stretch the challenges that he would go through, because a lot of times these are areas when you're affluent, when you're in a certain mode that you don't have to address. So I wanted to stretch Doug's character to see how he would handle things that were outside of his normal realm. And for Lisa as well. For her realm is that she's in control of everything. She's in control of her life. And now she has a partner. So this is a stretch for her as well, not only to have a partner of a different race, but to have a partner, period, when you're independent like that. So I wanted to stretch both characters.
I got you. So then I'm curious, how were you inspired to create Doug? I can understand you being an African-American woman, Lisa, probably a little bit easier, but what helped you create Doug's character?
I think Doug was much easier than Lisa. Doug is, because we always see Doug on TV. We always see the lawyer shows. We always see the handsome guy. We always see, the good looks, the money, the cash. That was, to me, the easiest character to put together. Lisa was a little more challenging because she's an athlete. And that is kind of one area that I didn't excel at as a kid, was athletics. And what is the mindset of a true athlete, like a FloJo, for example? What gets her up in the morning to go running? where I'm rolling over and looking at the clock saying, no, do I have to get up? So hers was a little more challenging on the sense of being an athlete, whereas his challenges were, and I'm still working through, is his reactions to his changing world.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I can understand that. It's kind of what you identify with mostly, right? Sometimes I believe that transcends anything dealing with race. It's like if you're an affluent person, you know what it's like to be affluent. You can write that.
Mm-hmm.
If you grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, white, black. You grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. You grew up on the wrong side of the tracks.
Right.
So I get that. That makes a lot of sense. And so I can understand your difficulty where for somebody like me who I grew up as an athlete, you know, running, jumping, wrestling, doing all that good stuff, that's what I'm used to. So I can see that character being easy for me to write because I understand that pride and that sense of competitiveness, and I can understand getting into that mindset would possibly be a little bit harder. That makes a lot of sense. That's very interesting. So do you have any have you had any kind of contributors to your, besides your son helping you out, is there anybody else that contributes to your stories or helps you in any way, shape, or form?
Oh, yes. I've had, once I got ready to decide to launch the book, I had a woman I worked for as an attorney, and she edited the first book. So she's out in California. She works in aerospace, and we've been great friends. And so that was a huge, immense help. And also, like I said, Carlos, my son Carlos, his college friends. My son Marcus gave his moral support, as he was doing his schooling. And right now, I have a woman, and her name is Alex, and she lives in Cleveland metro area, and she's got a master's in creative writing. And she has really helped me identify some things to stretch my imagination and help me really get into the character details of the book. So she's also a writer, and she has her pen names. But for me, she's really been able to help me because this second book was going to be one book. Now it's stretched out into two books because I'm actually going in deeper than the first book. So she's really been an immense help. And my contributors are also on my website, so I have little bios of them. And really, really thankful for all that have come in and helped me get the book published.
Excellent. And just real quick, what is your website?
It's www.MaeLynn.com. MeaMaeLynn.com.
Excellent. And you have another book coming up here soon, correct?
Yes, it's Atlanta's Most Eligible Bachelor 2. It's due to be released on April 26th. Like I said, it's my youngest son's birthday. So the Spanish version is going to come a little bit later. So I'm hoping to have that one by June 9th. Because my son is kind of busy with his activities overseas and all that. So I said, okay, well, I'll get the English one out, but, I got a deadline for the Spanish. And it'll give me a little more time to see how I want to market the Spanish book.
Understood. And so do you have any other ideas outside of romance novels, or is romance pretty much where you're going to stick with for your future novels as well?
Well, I'm open to doing some other projects, and that's why I write as Mae Lynn, because once you get into a specific genre and you give your name to it, most people will start to identify you as that character or as that writer. So I actually have a project in the works with another author, and it's sort of it's called Tamika and Becky Explain It All Over Cocktails. So it's a little difference of a twist of how how we as women have our differences of being a black woman and a white woman in America and how we view certain things. So that project has been on the board for a while, so it's nowhere near completion, but it's a thought process, and that may be under a different pen name. So that's kind of another project that I'm tackling. And I'm not sure, there may be some others out there that I get into. And that's one of the reasons why I like the fact that this series is going to be published twice a year. That way, if I want to have a single project, I can drop it off in the middle of the summer.
Very nice. So just to backtrack a little bit here, now you are self-publishing, and that's the main thing that we do this podcast for.
Yes, I am.
Excellent. So what we deal with here on the Indie Publisher Bookstore podcast are either small presses or authors who are self-publishing themselves and doing it well, right? Like you said, you've sold 500 books. You sold books in Spanish, and you've gotten to the point where people are even pirating your books in Spanish and selling them, or giving them away for free. And those are things that you're having to combat. But because you're self-publishing, those are all things that you have to do on your own. So I want to backtrack a little bit. And first off, what made you decide to go the self-published route versus hooking up with a small press, or even trying to go to a bigger press, or even hooking up with a smaller press?
Well, the main reason why is because I didn't want somebody else controlling my dream. When you go into a traditional publishing house, you have to wait on them. And when you go into even a small press, you're under a contract. And if things are not working, you're under a contract. I really wanted the freedom to be able to publish when I wanted to, have the contributors that I want, and to be able to monitor the project and have my successes and failures rest on me.
That makes a lot of sense. You want to be the master of your own destiny and control everything else in your future. I completely understand that. It's definitely in my opinion, the best way to go, right? Because, you always want to be able to say, well, this did not work out because I wasn't able to do X, or I wasn't able to do Y. You don't want to have to deal with some of the situations of, I've heard horror stories about authors who write excellent books. The books are great. And then the books are doing well in certain parts of the country, right? Like, they're selling out in stores, different major retailers on the East Coast, and are selling out at major retailers on the West Coast. But, the South and the Midwest and, basically the central parts of the U.S., the books aren't selling. So what ends up happening to a lot of those authors is that because the books aren't selling here, that major chain may not reorder that person's books because, well, even though you're selling out there, you didn't sell out everywhere, so we're not going to reorder your book, and then the author is dropped by the the publisher, the big ones, is dropped by that publisher, and then it's like, wow, I wrote this great book, it had rave reviews, but it didn't sell well, I wonder why. And this was because it wasn't reordered, because it wasn't selling well in places that weren't interested in the book. So I do completely understand that aspect of you wanting to maintain control. What has been one of the most difficult challenges that you faced dealing with your own self-marketing and self-promotion and getting the first 10 sales, right? Because I know you said there was a article published at your alma mater, but when that article was published, did those first 10 sales happen, or what did it take for you to get those first 10 sales and beyond?
Well, I think that's part of the reason why I'm not sure. Maybe I had a combination of things going on. New launch, New author, first book, between, doing some advertising. So there are some people who strictly follow what's new out there and really want to have whatever the newest and latest and greatest. One of the things that I believe will happen, and someone had told me, is that when you're doing a book on Amazon and you have more than one, like a series, they have an algorithm that automatically starts to kick you out to say, if you like this one, the next one is available too. So what I would like to see is that when I start releasing, book 2, book 3, and I start to generate the audience and the following, that will enhance the sales as well.
That makes sense to me. And I've heard about that as well with Amazon. I know their algorithm is based on how many books do you have, how well one book is doing, and the more books you have and the better they're doing, it just kind of, they try to promote your book more and more on their site. So that's really interesting. And you actually have 3 books out. You have 1 book out, but 3 versions of that same book. So I'm sure that looks good to them as well, as like, oh, this author has European Spanish, Spanish of the Americas, and then a English version of it. So I'm sure that looks good to them as well.
Yeah, and I'm waiting to hear from Barnes & Noble. I sent them a copy of the book. Barnes & Noble has where you have to submit a book to them and give your reasons why and some of your marketing plans as well. So I would love to see it get into Barnes & Noble so that I could do some book signings with the major chain like that. That would be great. Making appearances is always great for an author, even if you don't sell a book. If you make the connections with people, I had a self-published author come to a table and recommend a website. Anything that will help you get your book out there and to talk to people and to draw the audience. One woman told me when I sold her one of my books at a book signing, she said, this book means a lot more to me because I know the story behind the book. So it's all about putting yourself out there, making the connections, talking to people, having a positive attitude, because you're not going to sell books every single day when you're starting out, because you're still, like I am, I'm still relatively unknown. So I know it's going to take some time for the word to get out there. But I really would like to hit the Atlanta markets as well, because the book is about, places that are fictional and non-fictional in Atlanta, that some of the people that read the book will notice and recognize some of the places, English and Spanish.
Right. No, that is pretty darn cool. So that's really interesting about how you're doing that, and then your future goals with it, which that's awesome. It's good to know that there's writers out there who are doing well in the self-publishing realms, even if it's, you're not, it's not, Stephen King or whomever else you may think of, but you're actually able to get there, get out, do book signings, get your book in people's hands, have people read your writing, and then for me, and tell me if this is how you feel about it, but I like that because it gives you the opportunity to influence people with your writing and to kind of entertain them, as well as give them something else to think about. And is that something that you try to do with your writing, is to get people to not just be entertained, but also to have new ideas and new things to think about?
Oh, yeah. And sometimes, especially as I'm writing through the Atlanta's Most Eligible Bachelor, some of these characters are people from my past that, especially when you get into a Southern black mom, there are certain things that, are common that, and especially in a certain generation, that they will say or have their opinion on. And some of these, for those who know what that's like, are going to say, my mom would say that, or my grandmother would say that. So some of it is going to be a step back through memory lane, or new to some. That said, I didn't know that, this actually happened. So So yes, I am looking to kind of expand a little bit on the Southern culture, and for those who are not or have not lived in that culture, like some of your West Coast people, or some people over in Europe that may want to come to the South region to say, oh, okay, is that common? Like, yes, ma'am, and no, sir. You're going to see that in the book. A lot of parts of the country, other parts of the country, aren't as attached to that title as they are down south.
That is how we are in the South. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, sir, no, sir. It's our bread and butter. I mean, heck, I think we even do relationships differently down here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the Southerners, we still have a stronger belief in romance and courtship and dating and all that.
I would agree.
Good stuff.
I would agree. And chivalry is not necessarily dead, especially with the true gentleman. I'm not saying everybody that, has a Southern birth certificate does this, but, when you're talking about being treated as a lady, getting the car door, getting the door for you as you're going into a restaurant, picking up the check, no questions asked. I mean, just and the respect, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and how, to have a disagreement without, and it's not by class. It's taught by the mothers and reinforced by the fathers. So you will have, whether it's, your garage mechanic or your, legal attorney, if they're taught that tradition, it's consistent.
Very true. I know here in Texas, I'll meet a lot of people from the West Coast or from the East Coast, and there'll be a woman, and I'll hold the door open for her while she's walking out behind me, and she'll be like, wow, I've never had a guy do that, or, there'll be like a guy who's on the side of the road, he needs a hand changing a tire, and I'm like, I pull up behind him and say, hey, man, you need a hand, help him out changing the tire. He's like, dude, why'd you even stop, man? This isn't your problem. I'm like, hey, this is Texas.
Yeah.
It's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to bring out. Some of that culture, and like I said, chivalry's not dead. It's still there, and it's very nice to be treated like a lady. Very nice. Very refreshing.
Excellent. Well, Mia, it has been wonderful talking to you today about your new book. And just one last time, it's coming out April 26th. It's Atlanta's Most Eligible Bachelor 2.
Yeah.
And the Spanish version should be coming out in June. Now, do people need to go to Amazon to get it, or can they go to your website to get it, or both?
They can do both. On my website, I link up to Amazon, and it's also for retailers. I do have it on Ingram Sparks. So if you're a local bookseller or a local bookstore and you'd like to have some copies on hand, Ingram Sparks has it. So it's not necessarily all CreateSpace or Create, through CreateSpace, because Amazon has CreateSpace for their paperbacks.
Right.
So some retailers prefer to use Ingram Sparks because of their return policies.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mia, and you have a great day.
Thank you, JR. Good talking to you.
Good talking to you, too.